Oscar Piastri once again finds himself in an uncomfortable position, and not simply because of the 10-second penalty he received in São Paulo. What amplified the controversy was McLaren's decision not to take any further action once the ruling was published. There was no request for a review, no public counter-argument, and no visible attempt to defend a driver who is still mathematically in the title fight. The choice became more conspicuous when several figures in the paddock, including Charles Leclerc, argued that the incident was at least a shared responsibility. McLaren's passivity made this penalty feel distinct from similar situations earlier in the season. The bigger issue is that it does not stand alone. Since Monza, Piastri has consistently been on the unfavourable end of strategic decisions. From being instructed to return the position to Lando Norris after executing a clean undercut, to race strategies that frequently insulated Norris, to the way the team responded to Piastri's performance dip across the Baku-Austin-Mexico swing, the pattern has been difficult to ignore. All of this formed the backdrop when the São Paulo penalty landed without any sign of protection from the team. It was not surprising that analysts and fans began questioning whether McLaren are genuinely treating both championship contenders on equal terms. Yet the title race remains alive. With 83 points still available, the final 3 rounds carry enough weight to alter the picture significantly, provided Piastri can re-establish the rhythm that defined the first half of his season. The pressing question is whether McLaren will genuinely support both drivers equally, or whether the late-season pattern will resurface once again. If you want to follow this story through to the final moments of the championship, consider subscribing as we unpack the full context behind this situation. The penalty itself has been scrutinised heavily. The stewards deem Piastri wholly responsible, citing lack of overlap and the lock-up into the corner that eventually led to contact with Kimi Antonelli and subsequently Charles Leclerc. However, a number of analysts viewed the decision differently. Leclerc stated bluntly that the incident was 50-50, making it clear he believed Antonelli had a role in closing the space. Chadwick described Piastri as hard done by, adding that Antonelli's approach to the corner had contributed to the chain of events. Jolyon Palmer argued that Piastri was effectively punished for choosing a safer line, rather than committing to a dive that would have complied better with the overlap guidelines. His suggestion was that the guidelines have become so rigid that they sometimes reward more aggressive approaches over caution. Even inside McLaren, there was recognition that the penalty was at least questionable. Team principal Andrea Stella described it as definitely on the harsh side, but chose not to pursue a right of review. He acknowledged that Antonelli contributed to the squeeze, but the team opted to accept the decision and move forward. That stance was a major part of what drew reactions in the paddock, because Guenther Steiner had already publicly criticised McLaren earlier in the year for not defending Piastri strongly enough. His argument is that a team in a title fight should make every reasonable effort to protect both of its drivers when points are on the line. This is the point where context becomes critical. Piastri's season has been defined by early-year momentum that began to fracture at Monza. That was the first moment the body language shift became visible. Piastri had legitimately undercut Norris off the back of a slow pit stop for the Brit, but McLaren instructed him to hand the position back. Piastri's immediate radio response: "A slow pit stop is part of racing," said enough. He complied, but later admitted the incident sat with him more heavily than he allowed to show at the time. Since then, the balance within the team has been closely examined by observers. The dip intensified in Baku, which Piastri himself described as the worst weekend I've ever had in racing. It was a sequence of compounding issues: a crash in qualifying, a jump start, anti-stall, another crash in the race and engine troubles earlier in the weekend. The tyres were difficult to manage, the track offered little grip, and his attempts to recover pace tipped into overdriving. From that point onwards, his rhythm wavered through COTA, Mexico, and parts of Brazil. Analysts noted a shift in his demeanour, with Rachel Brooks pointing out that Piastri looked lost at times, searching for answers that were not coming easily. At the same time, Norris found his strongest form of the year. His weekend in Brazil was near flawless. Pole, sprint win and Grand Prix win. Jacques Villeneuve said Norris did not put a foot wrong, adding that his composure under pressure has reached a new level. Norris himself insisted he was not thinking about the title, but rather trying to understand why the car lacked pace against Verstappen in certain phases. Even so, the point swing created the biggest gap of the season, a 24-point lead over Piastri and a 49-point gap back to Verstappen. There are elements outside McLaren that influence how the narrative has evolved. The reaction of the crowd in São Paulo and Mexico, where Norris was booed, complicated the image around the team. When a Racing Bull staff member was filmed provoking booing, the team issued an apology. Norris downplayed it, but admitted that dealing with the pressure and public reactions had become a part of his growth this year. The Mercedes side of the paddock has also contributed to the discussion. Toto Wolff addressed suggestions circulating among fans that Piastri was being disadvantaged by McLaren, stating firmly that there is no sabotage and dismissing the notion as unrealistic. However, Wolff simultaneously argued that the tyre degradation narrative presented by McLaren regarding Piastri late in the São Paulo race did not match Mercedes' data, as their readings showed Piastri's tyre window was actually stronger than believed. His intervention added another layer to the debate because it became rare for a rival team principal to question McLaren's analysis so directly. Kimi Antonelli, meanwhile, emerged from the weekend with his best career results, P2 in both the sprint and the Grand Prix. Villeneuve praised the teenager's composure under pressure, and Juan Pablo Montoya suggested Antonelli's performance validated Mercedes' belief that he could challenge George Russell as early as 2026. Montoya also offered one of the more striking assessments of the title situation, predicting that Verstappen could win in Las Vegas, Norris would finish on the podium, and that if Norris beat Piastri there, Piastri will be done mentally. Whether that prediction carries weight or not, it reflects the extent to which psychological momentum has become part of the conversation. If momentum has been a challenge, Piastri is not without support. Mark Webber, his manager, has emphasised that this season is already exceptional by historical standards. 7 victories and 14 podiums for a third-year driver fighting for the championship is extremely rare. Webber's view is that this phase is a character test, not a collapse, and he has focused on resetting Piastri's confidence heading into the final rounds. He has also urged people to recognise how unusual it is for a driver at this stage of their career to sustain a championship fight at all. The question then is how McLaren will handle the final stretch. Stella has acknowledged that Piastri showed positive race pace in the second and third stints in Brazil, suggesting that the raw speed is still there. With circuits like Las Vegas and Qatar offering different strategic variables, there remains space for the standings to shift. Norris cannot win the title in Las Vegas mathematically, which keeps pressure on both drivers. Piastri's path is difficult but not impossible. If he were to get back into winning form, Norris would need to finish consistently second to stay ahead. But for many observers, the championship is no longer a purely mechanical contest. It has become a story about internal dynamics at McLaren, decisions at Monza, the approach to Baku, the neutrality of strategy calls, the lack of defence in São Paulo. None of these individually prove anything, but collectively they raise legitimate questions about whether both sides of the garage are being given identical conditions in the most critical phase of the season. The championship will not be won by narrative nor lost by speculation. It will be settled by execution, consistency, and the ability to maintain clarity under pressure. The next rounds provide Piastri with an opportunity to reassert that clarity. The real uncertainty is whether McLaren, in the most contested title fight the team has experienced for years, will allow both drivers the same platform to deliver. And if the pattern we have seen since Monza reappears in the final weeks, what will that tell us about McLaren's long-term direction?